So what I'm working on today is a Trail Eze TE801 and Landau. And the driver said that the remote stopped working. So when he would engage the PTO and the hydraulics and hit these functions to tilt the deck, slide the rear axle forward, there's a receiver, kind of like a remote control, and it's supposed to remotely operate these levers. Well, over time they stopped working, and now they don't work at all. So what I did to try to diagnose the problem is first thing I did is I came up here and I checked this the receiver. The receiver's right here in this box, and when it has power, there's red lights to it, and the red lights kind of move and change depending on what selection you're trying to, what feature you're trying to move. And I opened up this junction box and I found a 20 amp fuse in there, and this red wire was actually corroded off and broken. So that's the first place I started. We're gonna start from the receiver and work our way back, right? So I fixed that, and still no dice, still didn't work. Well, I checked the batteries on the remote, that's fine. Reset the remote. There's a procedure you go through to make sure that the remote and the receiver are paired up. Basically you disconnect power, which would be, in this case, I just pulled the trailer plug off the front here, and then when you go ahead and you put power back to the receiver, what you're going to do essentially is hold down the on button and this, what would be function 1 is what they call it, at the same time, and then there is a fault light that stops blinking on the receiver. At that time, then you're going to release fault 1 first, the on 1 second, and then the remote will then be paired with the receiver. Well, that still wasn't giving me the results I was looking for. I thought, well, let's go over here, maybe we have a ground issue. So underneath the Trail Eze, if you start at where the levers are, you're gonna get underneath here, and there's a plate. There's a plate that covers this whole area here. 2 bolts there, and it goes in these slots. 1 slot there, 1 slot over there. Plate's on the ground. Well, this is the bottom back side of the whole valve that's on the outside. And all of the wiring attached to one ground point, right up in there, and that was badly corroded. This trailer is equipped with dragon hide undercoating, and I can tell you right now that if you go to buy a brand new trailer and the dealer tries to sell you this amazing thing called dragon hide rust preventative, do yourself and your mechanic a huge favor and don't buy it. It is the absolute worst. I've been working on this trailer for several years, maintaining it, and every time I have to fix something, this dragon hide has created a moisture barrier between the steel and the hide, and everything is badly corroded. It seems to be rusting faster than if it was just painted. And then to work on it, you have to cut or grind or sand the dragon hide off to be able to even get access to whatever you're doing, airbags, brakes, slack adjusters, even something like this, trying to get this ground, that nut off of there to change the grounds. It took me a die grinder. I use this die grinder with a cutoff wheel, and then a grinder with a grinding wheel to get that bolt off, and it was an absolute pain in the butt. But anyway, so what I did was I pulled all those grounds off, I cleaned them up, shined up the copper, shined up the frame then, and then put dielectric grease on it to go back together with it. So good solid ground. I know that that's good. All my wiring looks good. Still no problem. Still didn't have the issues fixed with this. The remote didn't work. Well, the next thing I did is I exposed this wiring harness. These 6 wires here control. They come from the receiver to this valve, right? So winch in, winch out. In no particular order here. Tilt bed up, tilt bed down, slide axle forward, slide axle back. They all control that. Well, I unplugged all these connections, and I have 12.4 volts at each of these connections, and then I went back together with them with dielectric grease. So what that's telling me, if you're following along, is we have 12 volts coming from the truck, 12 volts going into the receiver, 12 volts coming out of the receiver to this connection point, right? Which means the problem with you know, why the remote is not getting this valve to work would be in the solenoids, which are, this is kind of where we're at with this next project here. They're all up in here, and it's gonna be a little bit tricky to get to. They're up in here. So what you have are these wires, and then you have these solenoids. My guess is that just like everything else on this godforsaken trailer, there's corrosion. Then you can get a better angle here. Let me get my flashlight out. Okay. Right there's one right there. I'm shining my light right at it. Okay. My speculation is that there is corrosion between this solenoid and the connection point between it and the valve body itself. And that is not allowing the current to flow in there and operate the magnets. I don't know what, if you're watching this and you know exactly all the technical terms for how this works, but it basically turns it into an electromagnet, which allows this valve to operate one way or the other. You can kind of see, it looks like there's a nut. Yeah, see that nut right there? So my guess is, if I take that nut and loosen it, I could pull this right off of the valve, and there's probably gonna be some corrosion in there. Clean it up, sandpaper, some dielectric grease, go back together, and then we're gonna see if that fixes it, all right? So to do that though, I may have to, this one I can get to by moving that out of the way. Looks like I'm gonna have to disconnect a couple of these hydraulic lines. And if I do this properly, I won't get a hydraulic bath, because that's no fun. So stay tuned, we'll see what we can come up with. All right. All right, so it's hard to tell. It's kind of dark in here, but that pulls right off there like that, okay? And then you can see corrosion, pretty bad corrosion right around that surface there. Same with up in there where it connects, a lot of corrosion there. So we're gonna clean that up, and I bet all of them are like that. We'll see what that does for us. Okay, so my coil, those aren't solenoids, those are coils. Cleaning that coil up like I said, and was relatively confident would fix it, didn't actually fix the problem. Cleaned up all the corrosion on these two coils, installed them back in, and we still had the same problem. I could hear the coil click when you hit the remote button, but it wasn't actually pulling the spool and operating the hydraulic valve. And so what I ended up doing was bypassing the truck altogether to see if potentially it was a truck issue. So what I did was I disconnected one of these wires right here. This is where it comes from the receiver, bullet connectors, and then to the coils. And so what I did is I just brought a battery from the shop out and went directly from a 12-volt battery to the coil supply line, and then ground the battery to the chassis ground up top here that we talked about, and gave me the same problem. The coil would click, but it wasn't pulling this valve. So I called another mechanic, and we discussed some things. We both scratched our heads, and I started looking at this whole valve assembly and the bracket that it's bolted to, which is kind of hard to see. The bracket's up there, and it's bolted to this cross member right here for the frame. You can see those new bolts and nuts. Well, Dragon Hide, the worst ever. I got these bolts out of here. Both sides, there's 4 bolts that hold the bracket, that hold this whole valve assembly in place. And I loosened it, so this whole valve was loose, and I wiggled and shook, and all the rust, the rust and stuff that came out of here where this bracket bolts to this crossmember was insane. On a hunch, right, my hunch was maybe this hydraulic valve needs to be grounded to this frame. And maybe there was a bunch of corrosion that got in there, which was preventing it from making a good contact, because it didn't make sense that, 6 coils, right, 2 for each spool, went bad all at the same time, right? And generally that doesn't happen. You might get 1 fails, or maybe 1 or 2 fails at a time, but generally all 6 for 6 to fail is not going to work. So put new bolts in there, we shook and wiggled and we shook and wiggled, and I got a whole bunch of that dirt out. And so we're gonna test drive it here and see if maybe I got it, because if it doesn't work now, it's gonna stress me out.